Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Antonia Adezio, president of the Garden Conservancy, and it's my privilege to welcome you together with our co-host organizations, the New York Botanical Garden and Wave Hill, to celebrate Frank Cabot, a horticultural hero, and his great legacy. And now I'd like to ask Gregory Long, president of New York Botanical Garden, to come say a few words to us.
Thank you very much, Antonia. It's a great honor for us here at NYBG that you've all come here today to celebrate Frank Cabot's immense influence on 20th and 21st century horticulture. It's also terrific that the leadership and members of our sister institutions are all here. The Garden Conservancy, Wave Hill, Stonecrop, the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, that we've all come together in this way. It's a wonderful event for us. Frank and Ann Cabot's connections to NYBG go back about 50 years. The earliest references in our archives are to Ann's membership on the Advisory Council in 1960, and she became a member of the corporation in 1961. Frank was elected to the board in 1970, became vice chairman and then chairman in 1973. He served as chairman until 1976 and was on the board until 1979. He was appointed to our most honored group, called Distinguished Counselors to the Board, along with his friends Rosemary Veary and Penny Hobhouse in 2003, and he was in that role at the time of his death. The years of Frank's chairmanship here were expansionist. That period included the creation of the Mary Flagler Carey Arboretum as part of NYBG, the creation of a new rose garden, the writing of Mr. Everett's Great Encyclopedia, and New York City's first major capital grant for the restoration of the conservatory. But it is, of course, as we all know, his leadership at Wave Hill and his role in the creation of the Garden Conservancy that history will remember Frank. Not to mention the creation of Stonecrop and Les Quatre Vents with his musical, equestrian, rosarian, vegetable gardener wife, Anne. I am sure our successors in American and world horticulture will long remember Frank Cabot for his place in the pantheon of American gardeners, garden designers, and institution builders. And I suspect they will envy us, those of us who are here today, for having known and learned from him. Thanks so much for coming.
Today, among many other things, we look back to the founding of the Garden Conservancy in 1989, an event that was inspired by Frank and Ann Cabot's visit to Ruth Bancroft's garden in Walnut Creek, California, and puzzled by how one could save a garden like that, because Ruth told Frank that she really didn't have anyone in her family that wanted to take care of it. He worried about it all the way home, and Anne famously said in the car, "Well, Frank, why don't you start a garden conservancy?" And I'm not sure she really meant it, but he took it as a very good suggestion, and here we all are today. Frank's impulse was immediately to gather people who could help him do that, and he chose luminaries from the horticultural firmament to help. He recruited right off the bat Marco Polo Stufano, director of horticulture at Wave Hill, Betty Corning, who was a past president of the Garden Club of America, and then he knew we needed a beloved public figure, and fortunately one was available in the form of Angela Lansbury, who became our honorary chair. A passionate gardener herself, Angela was a longtime friend of the Cabots, and she graciously agreed to lend us her illustrious name and be the face of the Garden Conservancy in those early years. We will all long remember her visit to the Ruth Bancroft Garden to celebrate its launch as a public garden, highlighted by Angela's reminiscences about her life and career. We are honored to have her here with us today. Angela Lansbury.
Thank you, Antonia, so much for that lovely introduction. I have to put my glasses on. Thank you. It is with great pleasure, but with a degree of sadness, that I greet you on this lovely day at the Botanical Gardens, a day in which we will celebrate the life and extraordinary accomplishments of our dear friend, Frank Cabot. I only wish that my first time addressing you as honorary chair of the Garden Conservancy would have been in his presence. You could say, why me, Angela Lansbury? Well, I'm glad to be able to tell you that in 1989, my husband Peter and I joined with Frank and his wife Anne, whom I had known since we were little girls at Glenwood Farm in the early days. We were all together when the Ruth Bancroft Cactus Garden in Walnut Creek was selected. It was to be the first project inaugurated in what became the Garden Conservancy, an organization that opened its offices in the village of Cold Spring, New York, where Antonia Adezio, the wonderful president, has overseen the enormous responsibilities of running this hugely successful enterprise. The Ruth Bancroft Garden was only the first, of course, of many unique and lovely gardens rescued throughout the country that would otherwise have suffered from neglect and lack of funds and become simply weed patches. So with the support and funds provided by the Garden Conservancy, they managed to thrive and get back some of their original glorious beauty. The great gardens Frank created with his wife Anne are unique. Stonecrop in particular, one that I think about often when I remember Frank battling a problem with the rocks and the water. Remember that? Yes. And the magnificent garden Frank created on his family land, of course, in Malbaie, Quebec, Les Quatre Vents, described as the most pleasing and horticulturally experience in North America. I actually got to do some weeding there. I'm a good weeder. I've weeded their gardens everywhere. New Zealand, Stonecrop, Malbaie. I'm a good weeder. Frank's book, The Greater Perfection, through glorious photographs and descriptions of its creation, is certainly a feast to all who strive to achieve beauty, even in a small corner of their own backyards. So I join with you and Anne and his family today as we celebrate his life and passion of certainly one of the most uniquely sensitive and unique individuals I have had the privilege of knowing. Thank you so much.